So, due to the coronavirus outbreak, many of us are finding ourselves being instructed to stay indoors, and as a result, a lot of companies are trying to take advantage of this or reward us and incentivize us to do so in order to help prevent the spread of the outbreak. Blizzard is no exception, providing the absolutely fantastic Winds of Wisdom buff that I'll pop up on the screen for you here, which is essentially a doubling of all experience gains. Now, I think it's only fair that we do our part and take advantage of this lovely buff and stay indoors, leveling up toons in order to prevent this outbreak from worsening. Now, this does beg the question then, what is the best way to take advantage of this buff? And that's what we're going to talk about here today. So, as far as I see it, we have 4 main ways of leveling, and I'm going to go into the pros and cons of using this buff with each of those methods. So let's dive into it. Now, the very first thing that you're going to want to do, irrespective of what method of leveling you're going to be using, is going to be making sure you're getting your XP boosts from all other available sources as well. So most notably, this is going to be things like wearing your heirlooms, whether you're going to have the 10% experience pot that you can get from Warfronts, or any other experience boost that you can have. There are actually quite a lot in WoW, I won't list them all here, but on top of those ones we do have some slightly more exclusive ones, be it the Darkmoon Faire, only available when the Darkmoon Faire is in town. You get the experience buff by riding on the rides in the fair, or you can also have your increased experience buff if you are a monk from your monk daily. But enough about the prep work, so let's dive into method number 1. Now, method number 1 for discussion is going to be questing. Now, questing is the bread and butter of the leveling experience for the majority of players in WoW, be it on retail or classic or any other version thereof. Now, questing at first glance is a very simple way of using this buff, because obviously you're just going to do everything exactly the same as you ordinarily would, and you're going to go about just completing quests and handing them in, but getting a considerably bigger experience reward at the end. Now, one thing however to mention is that you are going to be leveling a lot faster, which means if you are in a zone that has a relatively small level bracket, or you are only in it for a short period of time because of how high of a level you are in comparison to the level bracket of the zone, you may find yourself shifting zones more frequently. However, this is not commonly the case, at least not in the first 60 levels, due to the massive brackets that there are, but it is something that can potentially happen, so do bear that in mind. What I would recommend, however, is that you take advantage of this experience boost by actually using the Party Sync system. Now, the Party Sync system is going to make it an incredibly better experience questing than it ordinarily would be in WoW. Now, with the Party Sync system, when you get to a level bracket where all of the zones are inherently quite difficult or slow to level in, you can actually go back and do older content that you have since out-leveled, but revert yourself back to the appropriate level of the bracket of that zone. So, as an example, I am leveling a Allied Races character at the minute, and it is at level 70 roughly at the time of recording. Now, both the Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King content that I could be doing right now for the questing experience is quite inefficient. It's not the best leveling experience available in the game, and this is just basically because quests are quite hard to complete, they're few and far between, there's a lot of travelling, and while they are quite enjoyable, it just slows you down quite considerably. So by comparison, what I can do with the Party Sync feature is essentially revert my level back down to level 60, and then go and complete old world zones that are scaled up to level 60, which gives me a wide variety of zones that I can use, including ones that I'm very familiar with and are also designed to be completed naturally at a lower level, which means that it's quite common for there to be many quests in a quest hub and all of the objectives are quite close together, especially if you pick a zone that was designed originally to be done by people who do not have a mount. When you scale back to level 60 from a higher level, you will still be able to use your flying mounts. It will be at a lower speed, the base speed available for flying mounts, but you will be able to fly. So obviously, if quest hubs and objectives are designed to be close enough together that you can walk between them without any movement speed or mount whatsoever, the ability to fly greatly increases the speed that you can level in these zones, and you will be receiving roughly the same experience per mob and per quest that you would be if you were to be leveling in these zones that are the appropriate level to you. Now, in order to use Party Sync by yourself to do this, what you're going to need to do is be able to log in to 2 accounts simultaneously. Now, this is quite easy to do. From your Battle.net launcher, simply load into the game as you normally would and enter into the world on the character that you were wanting to level. Then, at the same time as that version of WoW is still open, you are going to want to Alt-Tab out of the game, go into your File Explorer, locate where the retail version of WoW is located on your computer's installation, load the wow.exe file that is located in that folder, log into a second account, and then log into a character that is of the same faction as yours and is at the appropriate level bracket that you want to be made in sync with. I.e., if you want to go to the old world, you can use any character that is the same faction that is between level 1 and level 60. At this point, all you're going to need to do is simply invite the characters to be in the same party as each other, and then open your map, click the Party Sync button, and then go on your alternate character and accept the Party Sync. At this point, your higher level character will be reduced in level to match the bracket of the higher level character. It does not matter what level your character is within that bracket, your character will always be scaled down to the max level of that bracket, i.e. if the character is level 1 you are using, you will go down to level 60. If the character is level 59, you will still go down to level 60. This means that you are able to absolutely obliterate most mobs in the zones that you'll be questing. And a little extra tip, if you use zones that are very low level, the scaling doesn't make the mobs as difficult as it should, so you can often just obliterate quests, absolutely steamrolling the mobs, and just fly through the zones at lightning speed. Next up, we have a bit of a 2-for-1. We have dungeons and we also have time walking. Now, we'll talk about dungeons first. And basically, the big benefit of this experience boost that you're going to see in game if you are leveling via dungeons is the fact that you are going to level so fast via the dungeons, it is unlikely you will ever get the same dungeon twice while leveling. This means that you're not going to find yourself repeating dungeons where you have already completed the quests, meaning that every dungeon that you run, not only will you be getting a massive increase into the experience you gain for completing the dungeon and for all of the mob kills throughout, but you will also be able to hand in the dungeon quests applicable to the dungeon on basically every run that you do. Now, on the flip side of this, the problem with doing dungeon leveling is that you are still going to be subject to queues and also to potentially having rather rubbish teammates. Now, this can be mitigated by both performing a more desired role yourself, be it healer or tank. Particularly if you are playing a tank, you'll get almost instant queues whatever the level bracket. And you can also team up with other people that you know who are going to be more skilled than the average player that you would be put into groups randomly with, and that will obviously improve your performance in the dungeons and maybe improve your queue times, and therefore make this a more efficient method. Now, as for time walking, the same premise basically applies, but the difference being that you are less likely to avoid getting repeat dungeons because there are only a limited amount of them, and you are also only going to be able to perform time walking once during the time frame that we have the Winds of Wisdom buff for. Currently, at the time of recording, that buff is only going to be active up until the 30th of April, and we are only going to have time walking for 1 week during that period. Depending on where you are in the world, it will be the week of the 7th or the 8th for your start of your WoW week, where we will have Cataclysm time walking. Now, on the positive side of doing it with time walking, you will find that you get a massive amount of experience for the completion of the dungeon, which does mitigate for the lack of quests that you're going to be able to get. However, the dungeons themselves are going to be quite a bit more challenging, and you could find yourself placed with relatively useless players once again. But that's going to be dungeon and time walking as an option for you. And our last of the listed ways of leveling that we're going to discuss is going to be the PvP method. Now, PvP is something of a dice roll when it comes to leveling, because once you get into the battleground, if you are able to secure a speedy win, you will find that it is the most efficient way of leveling that there is in WoW. You are very easily capable of getting a win in a battleground in sub 5 minutes, depending on the battleground that you get, and you will get realistically at least a level per battleground win that you take part in. You can also get lucky and join partway through a battleground that is about to be won, at which point then you can have a 10-second battleground that gets you a full level of experience. Now, it is unlikely that that is going to occur, but it can happen. Some of the limitations, however, are, again, you could face longer queue times depending on your faction and level bracket, and you can also find yourself entering battlegrounds repeatedly that you are going to lose, and if you are losing battlegrounds, then it is not at all an efficient way of leveling. So, if you are leveling as part of a group and you know that you can comfortably make it so that you win the majority of your battlegrounds, this may be something you want to consider. Or if you play Horde, who have a considerably higher win rate in battlegrounds, it may again be something that you want to consider doing as a leveling method. It is something that I would recommend doing at least once a day, because your first battleground win of the day gets you a considerably larger amount of experience than the subsequent ones. And that is also true for the dungeons that we spoke about in the previous method of leveling. Now for some closing thoughts. The first thing that occurred to me is that when I was looking at Party Sync for questing as a leveling method, I actually thought that it may make the viability of mob grinding go up as well, for it's a leveling technique, and this is true, and you certainly can level via mob grinding during this buff, or even when the buff isn't there. However, I did find it to be less efficient in my experience than questing. Now, if you were able to find a set of mobs with fast or preferably instantaneous respawn, and you were able to AoE grind them down efficiently, non-stop, and with a decent kill speed, then this may become a very good method of leveling. It's also a method of leveling that can get you a considerable return in terms of drops and gold while leveling as well, so that is something to bear in mind. During my experimentations, I went to the Murlocs in Elwyn Forest, where I was able to level quite efficiently, AoE grinding the mobs down, despite the fact that my AoE class is not the greatest. I am leveling a warrior, which isn't going to be as efficient as some of the caster classes for doing this, but it was pretty efficient nonetheless. It did unfortunately return very little in terms of drops, at which point I decided that I would try out a second location in the Burning Steppes. This did prove to be considerably better in terms of the drops that I was able to attain. However, my kill speed dropped dramatically and I was still getting the same amount of experience per mob that I was when I was killing the Murlocs. Now, the Murlocs were substantially easier to kill, and I was able to basically just do as I please with very little attention to how I was playing while watching something on my second monitor and not really caring about what I was doing. If I'd have been doing that while I was in the Burning Steppes, I would certainly have failed. I did actually die at the end of my testing in the Burning Steppes, which does show that it is possible. If you were to do the mobs individually, chances are you'd be able to go through and kill them all very easily. However, if you're trying to be efficient and get those extra kills per minute, then you may be pushing yourself to try and get that in the higher level zones to get you a bit better gold return. For any of the methods that we discussed whereby you're going to be in a group, it is always my recommendation, if you're trying to be efficient, to be in a group with people that you know who are of a similar or better skill level at the game than yourself, who are equally prepared and motivated to try and achieve the end goal, because that's always going to prove to be better and more efficient than using random people. One final thought that occurs is that, of course, none of these methods are strictly going to prevent you from engaging in any of the others, i.e. if you want to do some questing and a dungeon on the side and then maybe do your one battleground a day, you are more than welcome to do so, and it may actually prove to be more efficient than simply using any one of the methods, because it will prevent burnout. Now that is something that is very real. When I first started leveling this character, I wanted to do it via dungeons because that's the way that I typically have always leveled my characters, but playing with some terrible players had really affected my desire to continue to leveling the character. However, I did want to get to max level, and I found myself sort of doing it when I didn't want to, and that's not the best way to play a game, and I stopped and ended up playing a different game instead, which is obviously then going to make it not a very efficient leveling method whatsoever. But that's going to about do it for this video, guys. I do hope that you found it entertaining and informative. If you did, please do consider liking the video, and if you want to be kept up to date with any future videos, then please do consider subscribing to the channel. But for now, guys, that's going to about do it for me. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Later.